Hey guys, Caio here, and another episode of Table Talks is starting. How's it going, Julian?
Hey, Caio, how are you? Very good. Summer's ending, business is pumping up, so yeah, happy.
Yeah, that's nice. So today we have a very special guest, our first guest from Argentina. And it's a guy that pretty much, a lot of you may already know, but it's the first time we are actually conversing here during the podcast. We have Manu from Belo. How's it going, man?
Hey, Caio. Hi, Julián. Really nice. Thanks for the invite. Pretty excited about this opportunity.
That's nice. And I think, man, like for start to start fresh here in the conversation, like I mentioned, Belo is a very well-known company in the industry, but of course, some people may know the company but not know you. So I think for us to start a conversation here would be very good for you to introduce yourself. Who are you, and what you did before Belo, and what actually got you with the idea to build a company.
Awesome. Yeah, so well, Manuel Beaudroit, 44 years old, married, I have a daughter, two stray dogs. I have a background in biology and business, a drop off being an entrepreneur of my life, to be honest. Um, Fun fact, my first work job was at the City Zoo in Buenos Aires. So that's pretty unique, I would say. And yeah, for the last 14 years now, been working full time in crypto. So seen pretty much everything but Satoshi. So Satoshi is still unknown for us. But yeah, pretty involved from the very early days of crypto in Argentina. And Argentina was pretty active since the very beginning. There is a saying here that Satoshi is Argentine. I think it makes a lot of sense because of all our economical history. But yeah, and since 2020, yeah, shaping Belo and making this as successful as possible.
That's amazing, Manu. And before deep in dive into the industry and what you are doing now, I'm kind of wondering, like, being in this industry for 14 years can be like a fraction of a time for most of the industries, but it's almost all crypto existence. So I was wondering, so if you can like summarize what have you seen during this journey? No, like how's the industry evolved, like in regions like ours or in country like ours, and w- what's the industry today?
Yeah, I'm tired, boss. It's like uh, too many years. I think that the first few years, I would say 2014, 20, yeah, 2012, 2014 were kind of the, let's say, anarcho-capitalist years of crypto. So all the cypherpunks, until a few years more, maybe 15. But from 15 onwards, I think on 14, when Bitso launched, Bitex, which was my previous company, also launched, I think we start to see kind of applications of the technology into real life use cases in that sense of accessing to the asset. I think the next stage began in. So we started doing cross-border payments in 2015 on top of Bitcoin prior to stablecoins. I think that was kind of the first years of what we are seeing 10 years afterwards. But maybe with Tether 2016 and DAI, I think DAI had a really big I mean, was a big mover of what stablecoins can become in the future. I think at least in Argentina, I think that was kind of 2017, 2018. The guys from Buenbit did a really good job there. And we went from, cyberpunks to start seeing the first use cases of Bitcoin as investment assets to stable coins, and then from I would say 2020 onwards, kind of these merge with the day-to-day financial products. I think right now there is much more people using crypto every day without knowing that they are using crypto than all the. I think that has been kind of if we can divide it into some pieces. I think that's kind of how we're seeing. And forward, I think that it will only extend. I think what we are seeing is much more assets getting tokenized. As you know, we launched RGT, it's already the second asset with more AUM in the region, and I think that securities, bonds, stuff like that will eventually also be something really popular. So I think we're going to the tokenization of everything in a way, and I think in general the industry has been doing a really good job at being much more friendly from the UX perspective because, as you may all know, crypto is fucking difficult, for most people.
Yeah, me and Rony were just discussing right before we started that years ago was more kind of more fun in a sense where we could do anything that we want and not worry about necessarily like being have a full legal opinion everything and all those things. But of course, it
Yeah,
it,
Yeah.
it, it comes for the better. But before I think it was more fun to be a DJ.
I'm gonna make a disclaimer, Manu. I was complaining that I received a requirement from Arca, which is our tax agency, and I
Yeah.
have two people full time working on that, which was not the case on crypto 10 years ago. No.
No, totally, and I think that that's a really good point. So my I remember trying to open a bank account in 2015. It was impossible, and in a way, the reaction was, okay, we need to be more compliant than the actual banks, and which in a way was pretty stressful because it was an unknown territory for most people. Obviously, the anarcho-capitalists and the cyberpunks hated that, but in a way, it's also you need to understand that if you like to grow and to become a relevant player, you need to be compliant. And there are certain rules that maybe you can bend them, but you cannot break them. And I think also being part of or the fact that you are compliant, you can become a voice in when the government or the Congress start to design, a project for regulation. Hey, these guys should be heard, in a way. And I think that's one thing that we have been trying to be really active. For a builder to be dealing with Congress people and lawyers, it feels like a waste of time, but I think it's part of the job.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I know the hurdle. But yeah, I think like one interesting thing too is that um, in fintech specifically, because there's the old saying in startups, the classic move fast and break things, right? But I think especially when you're dealing with fintech and you're dealing with other people's money, there's no move fast and break things because otherwise, people will lose money or
Yeah.
they will, maybe don't get their salary to pay their bills. For example, if you I don't know, your infrastructure doesn't work and you get hacked or something like that, you are literally impacting people's lives. So I think in fintech, we need to be very careful, especially in a now wanna be regulated industry that we are. And
And even, I mean, we have these conversations right now saying, hey, AI is going to replace everything. And I, I do feel and think and I'm convinced that the rules are changing in a way, but you cannot rely 100% on AI because it already shown that it commits a lot of errors and it can hallucinate, and it's getting better obviously, and there's going to be a lot of impact in how the job is done. I think there's a lot of reconversion, but still it's early technology. You need to do a lot of exploratory around it, but you need to be cautious because at the end of the day, you are dealing with money, and trust from your users.
yeah, exactly. And I think like starting to talk about Belo here, because you were saying that you were doing cross-border payments with Bitcoin back in 2015,
Mhm.
but how does it change to be what you are doing today? And of course, if you can, share with us how was the start of the company and how did you guys evolve to what you guys are now?
So the company that I did that was not Belo. I was called Bitex, which was my previous company. But basically was, hey, we launched Bitex in 2014. Bitcoin went from $1,000 to $150. No one was buying. Hey, we need to do something if we want to survive. And we found out that there were a lot of freelancers in Argentina needed to get paid. We have capital controls. Okay, Bitcoin has been built for exactly this. The problem was basically how do you coordinate liquidity globally? Obviously, Bitcoin was at the time, and I think it's still true, the most liquid asset in crypto. The problem is, how you hedge the position. How much, if you have, 1,000 euros and you need to pay $1,000 in Argentina, the equivalent in pesos. Okay, how do you do all those trades? And one of the founders of Bitex, they came from the financial industry, and these guys invented what it's called contado with liquidación, contado con liqui, which is basically doing blue chip trading. And in that way, I think that was in the 80s, they pay for the Maradona pass to Napoli using bonds. So basically, we copy that into Bitcoin. We start doing that, and we start solving, a real life problem. Obviously, hedging that position were not easy. Having liquidity was not easy. There was a lot of stuff that do not scale at the very beginning, but I think the solution was so good that we even convinced the central bank in Argentina to allow us to start providing this service to an actual bank in Argentina, and it was a really good use case. They even invite us from the Bank of International Settlement, which is kind of the central bank of central banks, to go and talk in Brasilia in front of 40 central banks. That was a pretty interesting experience, to be honest. And then I think what we did wrong in a way was not adapting the solution to the technology. Not starting to play around with Tether and DAI from the very early days, which I think could have been dramatically better in terms of the handling of the transactions, as well as getting to be more proficient in how to use and build solutions on top of that. So yeah, it was, I would say, when there is an actual need, I think people tend to be much more pragmatic in terms of, hey, what solution to use, and that was in a way in our favor. The problem maybe is that one thing that I remember is, hey, you need to do this at scale, because if you are only like buying, yerba mate, and it's a really minuscule business, now you need to think about, hey, let's go global, let's go into the main countries and actually start to get into other use cases that will be much bigger over time than just one small niche.
Um, you mentioned two things that are interesting for me. So one is that the appearance of real needs slash use cases was a big pump to the adoption of Bitcoin, of crypto, no? And particularly in our country where people are not used to saving dollars. Well, like saving in dollars except for the last 2 years, well, saving in dollars has been more profitable than buying Bitcoin for the last year. But except for the last 2 years, on a long term, Argentinians tends to save in dollars, but with capital controls, as you mentioned. So stablecoins die first, and then USDT and USDC. It all appeared like a survival, like parts of a survival kit, no? But my question is, do you see that being able to take over the financial system? It's gonna coexist with the traditional banking. Do you think more use cases will appear that will mount on top of stablecoins? So what's your view on the future of stablecoins?
Well, last year we acquired Lumx Finance to basically deploy the local stablecoin playbook in a way. So I think that chapter it's one big if, which I think it's already showing signs that I think we are moving in the right direction. So we see local stablecoins popping up and becoming something relevant, because in a way, if you think it's a great way for governments even to have international buyers in a on-chain scenario. I think everything around securities, tokenized securities, is something that also will have a big impact. I think the democratization of access to investments is one thing that still, let's say, remain to be well developed globally, I would say, because what you think when you think about the US or maybe Brazil, I don't know exactly Brazil how you see this, Caio, but in Argentina the amount of people investing in stocks, it's really small, and because it's exclusive for some people, it's not well known, or they don't have money, it's difficult to enter. There's multiple reasons. And then I think Argentina, for example, has been doing although we are not doing a lot of good job in some aspects, they have been doing some good job in others. The whole regulation around crypto, I think, has been net positive in a way. The possibility to tokenize private companies, bonds, to crowdfunding, all that stuff that in a way can outcompete the traditional credit products from banks. I think that's super interesting. So yeah, so that's one part. I think when you see this as a founder, the access to liquidity from the venture capital perspective, there is a power law into which how well known, how well positioned, which school have you went to. Sadly, it's true. Maybe someone from the favela will never raise $20 million because they haven't went to all these schools or institutions. I think crypto in that sense can be a tool of change for society overall. I think it's much more democratic in a way. The whole let's say privacy feature allows you to be in equal opportunities. The problem is that on the other side, I'm not talking about not being compliant, but I think the forces that are from the legacy financial sector, in some cases, they try to push back innovation. And from my point of view, innovation is like water. If you build a dam, the water at some point will surpass through that wall because it flows. And I think we need to understand that regulation shouldn't be a moat. It should be kind of a way to channel all that force and make things more impactful in a way.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest use cases that I see that you guys have been involved is the Argentinian tourists spending in Brazil, right? So there's a lot of news that I read last year about Belo being responsible for, I don't know, like 70% or 80%, something like that, of the spend of Argentinians here. Uh, for example, using this case as an example, is this something that you guys, uh, did this just happen? Is this demand something that you guys already saw? And it was like, okay, let's focus on that because there's this demand that we know that exists, or was something that caught you guys in surprise?
So we start tinkering with pigs 2023, initially because Argentina was really cheap for Brazilians at the time, and we partnered with CamiPay to allow local merchants to receive PIX payments. And that was it worked fine, but the problem with, let's say, the acquiring part or the merchant side is that it's really hard and expensive to scale. You need to go one by one, talking with the owner, the finance guy, the owner, the administrator in the shop. So there is a lot of things that we need to do in terms of the product, the distribution, the selling cycle, that will take us forever to actually have a really big impact. And at some point say, okay, if we have done this and it's working great, but obviously we have a cap of growth because of our own operation, how we can do the opposite, allowing Latin American users go to Brazil and pay with Pix, which has demonstrated that it's a massive network that it's open for everyone. And we start talking with the guys from Camino Pay, say, hey, we want to do this. No, it's not possible. Let's figure out, let's see how we can accomplish this. And in like 1 month, we put together the whole solution. We start testing. We launched in January 24, and the growth was like this, and I think that, and from a product perspective, and I love doing products, and I love marketing also, but seeing that your product, expands in such an aggressive way organically, it's like that's product market fit, feeling that everyone talks about it and no one actually knows how it is. I think that was pretty. And then it's more on, hey, how we can expand that, make it more popular. The good thing is that in Argentina we already had QR payments, which was pretty. It's one of the most widely used payment methods. So it was not something, let's say, different in terms of experience for us. So it was pretty easy to adopt. Obviously, over the last year and a half, there was an explosion of competitors, and the kind of the market is reshaped in a way. But I think that experience was really interesting and give us a lot of information about how the user behaves, how they distribute, because also there were like a lot of moving parts into that. Take into account that initially, once a user wanted to pay in Brazil, they had like pesos. Those pesos should be converted to Tether, then send an on-chain transaction on over Polygon, receive the Tether, sell that, do the swap against reales, and do the settlement using Pix. So in some cases, like, hey, this will take like 1 minute. And for a Pix payment, 1 minute is like a lot of time, And okay, how do you reduce that to 5 seconds, And well, obviously that it's not easy. There's a lot of re-engineering in how you do stuff. But yeah, I mean, we get there.
I think that's one amazing example of how many things there are of people using crypto without knowing it. Like I'm ready to bet that like most of the people who pay with Pix in Brazil, they don't know that they are using crypto on the
Yeah.
on the back. Same case with remittances. There are already like lots of remittance companies that like settle accounts using crypto in the back because it's more efficient, it's cheaper than like doing Swift transfers or whatever. So my point here is that how's that for the crypto spirit? No, so are we still or are we gonna still be able to convey and to sell the crypto product to people, or we are just gonna move and like become the infrastructure from a different system that works on crypto or on top of crypto? Uh, what what do you think about that?
It's a question that I make myself every day, So,
Me too. That's why I'm asking.
so I have the feeling that definitely crypto, it's a new asset class, and I don't know until when we will still say new asset class, but definitely when you compare against gold that has been here for since the dawns of time, I think it's still true. So I think that crypto and asset will become it's relevant and will still be relevant in the future. I think there are gonna be a super big gray zone where you understand that maybe you are having exposure to a token of, so kind of it's the dollar but it's tokenized, but in my mind it's a dollar, but it's not the actual dollar, but you're okay with that because it works, it does the job. And then I think you will have a really big universe of people that that I would say usually how things work, how many people, the typical example, how many people understand how email, internet works, money works, and they use it on every day, So my guess is that same, let's say, curve of adoption or understanding of the technology will be even for crypto. I think that maybe the most interesting aspect that we are starting to see is the possibility to, in a way, onboard a new type of user into the economy, which are the agentic commerce in a way. So we are 9 billion people in the planet who will see how the population from a commerce perspective will do 1000x maybe or more. And I think the most important or the most impactful technology for that to happen will be crypto, because it's more it's 24/7, it's purely digital, it's native digital, it's better for fraction payments. So I think crypto will become really relevant in that segment, which when you see kind of the whole pie will be even maybe bigger, in terms of trillions or quadrillions of dollars versus the actual economy.
Going back to the discussion about local stablecoins, I think, of course, we're still in the early days of local stablecoins, right? But I think, of course, from the perspectives that are having, what we have been seeing in the market, they're here to stay, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think, of course, one of the main use cases that we have seen is that, for example, foreign people being able to access local currencies in an easiest way. For example, get access to local yield. In the case of Brazil, for example, 15% per year is a pretty good yield. So
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of interest in, offshore investors wanting to have access to that. And I think, of course, there's a discussion of on-chain effects too. From my perspective, we're still in the early days of that, to actually move what we do with the classic on and off ramping to a full on-chain experience. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think stablecoins are here to stay. I think that once again, I think that we'll be seeing more and more local vehicles popping up, and not because I'm trying to be super objective on this, not because we have one initiative. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna grow. It's because in a way, it's much more efficient to start dealing in local currencies uh, rather than going through a dollar-denominated stablecoin. Each time that we start this because we were looking to kind of take the middleman out of the equation, and in a way, if you can improve that, I think that's one of the variables in which local stablecoins make sense. And also because you can start to have exposure to, or give you exposure to your currency to other countries, to other investors. You can even, in a way, build a basket of currencies. Hey, I want to have exposure to emerging markets. Okay, you put some ratios of different stablecoins into a contract, and in a way, you have created a synthetic of Latin America. Super easy without opening a bank account at JP Morgan and putting in $25 million. You can do that with $100. So I think that plasticity, in a way, it's one of the things that I think allows stablecoins, also will allow us to stablecoins to grow much more. I have a big doubt around if this is something that will be actually used on local payments. Hey, is someone going to pay with Tether on the grocery store? It's happening maybe in Bolivia because they're going through a shit show phase right now, but I think it's more on from the Gresham, law. So people will start to spend first the money that burns in your hand, and then save on the hard assets. I'm not fully sure if stablecoins will be at the hand of the actual consumer on buying stuff. Maybe it is. I think both Visa and Mastercard, they have a really challenging future from my point of view, because definitely stablecoins are a super interesting way, and they are more efficient and free, and less less capital intensive than cards, and cards will need to evolve into some other thing. The good news for them is that they already have the network, which is super hard to they took like 60 years to build, but then you see something like Pix, and the growth has been, exponential, and it's free for everyone to use it. So I think there is something there. I'm not fully sure yet what will happen, but definitely it's something that is not gonna leave our economy, in a way.
Yeah, very interesting. I think one cool thing that you mentioned about the cards is like, yes, I totally agree with you about the challenge that these networks have. And on the other side, we have been seeing like an explosion of stablecoin cards, right? So one joke that I had with a friend from Visa was like, oh, maybe cards are cool again because of stablecoins. And I just wanted to also hear your thoughts on the stablecoin backed cards, and maybe what you see for the future.
Yeah. So it's funny because we launched our card in 2022, and it was the first crypto card for Mastercard. It was kind of really hard to explain what we wanted to do at the time, but we got. I think cards are super helpful. They are a super convenient way of paying. They are I would say, kind of the de facto international payment method, to be honest. It's much more safer than, going through the street with cash. I think it's pretty well accepted. Maybe in some, underdeveloped countries, you need still to pay with cash, but, in general, you have a really good experience globally. And the good thing is that, at least from my point of view and how we saw this from the very beginning, was you need to choose or create, not choose, I think it's the right word, which are the translators for normal people to understand that stablecoins, in this case, crypto in general, can be used on day to day. So for us was like three things. You will be able to spend it, and so receive and send money, both locally, internationally, almost for free or almost for free. That's kind of the digital wallet approach. You will be able to get a yield on those assets. So hey, I have this. What can I do? Make some money. Cool. And the third part is, hey, I can spend it locally and internationally. So I think those three things are super important. Which in a way it's funny because are kind of the three functionalities of money. A means of payment, a reserve value, and a ledger. So okay, but how do you create a product out of that? And I think in a way the cards have been a really good a proxy for normal people to understand that was true and can be used on day to day. Made the really bad decision of launching cashback,
Cash.
which is one 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 of the things that I regret personally for a long time. But I think well that was part of the mood of the time.
That's what happened when you get led by the marketing guys, and they
Yeah.
convince you. See, Manu, like I'm sorry, my connection dropped before when you were talking about stablecoins. So my follow-up questions on that is that we are seeing now that like there's kind of a duopoly in the USD part between Circle and Tether with USDC and USDT, and there are so many more, but no one of them like can reach the market cap they have. No, and now that local stablecoins are like being launched, there's a couple of them in Argentina. We have our experience in Mexico. So I was reading that yesterday a bank in Brazil launched a real stablecoin. So what's going to be the differentiation? So who's going to be the winner, or what's going to be the key on the local stablecoin part? Is it going to be liquidity? Is it going to be partnership with big companies? So what are the key to success for you on the local stablecoin part?
So
I like making you think. That's why.
yeah, it's a really tough question because I think you can kind of answer that from two perspectives. One is from the AUM perspective. which is the asset with the biggest AUM. But maybe there's only one holder. There's no transactions on that. So it is useful. Maybe it is, but it's not being widely used by millions of people. So I think maybe to answer it would be those two variables, AUM and usage. So the company, the institution, or whoever the agent, because I think that's true. That's in a way reach the point of the biggest AUM and transactions. It's gonna be the one that wins. My sense is that I have a prediction here, and also an idea or a conclusion about that prediction is that, as we've seen in fintech, every company has become a fintech company. I think every company will be tempted to launch their own stablecoin, but they will face the hurdles of dealing with the stablecoin. I'm not talking only about the compliance perspective or regulatory perspective, but actually security, technology, infrastructure, so and even distribution. So maybe it's important to understand that one of the biggest banks in the US, I think it's Starbucks, because of their loyalty program. I think this is not an actual loyalty program. I think it's much more, and needs to be taken care of properly. This is money. It can become as a private money initially, but at the end of the day, it's still money. And there is dealing with money for people that haven't dealt with money. It's fucking hard, and these guys. So I don't think that almost anyone should be able to do this, because the repercussions might be pretty bad. I think the experience was pretty hard for the US denominated ones, although, well, apparently now there has been some inside job, which I totally buy. But yeah, I think that's one thing that will happen. So explosion of stablecoins and the death of most of them.
Yeah, totally. And of course, not only because of their own mistakes, but also because of the new regulations, right? Because, we had the Genius Act last year. Brazil is now in the middle of starting to regulate issuers here too, because we had the new regulation coming for VASPs and stablecoin effects and all those things, but we don't have anything regarding issuers yet. So I think this year would be the year where stablecoin issuers would be regulated. And, from my perspective, and as a personal opinion, if they follow the same steps that they did with the VASP regulation, I don't think we will see many stable coins in Brazil because the bar is very high. But yeah, I think we are definitely excited for what's to
Yeah.
come on that.
Yeah, on the flip side, I think innovation should be free. And the problem with regulation overall is that sometimes, and I see this in Mexico, for example. Mexico, through their fintech law, what they have created was kind of a walled garden into which innovation was not possible or was not easy to access. And I think that's in detriment of the ecosystem in a way, because if you do not allow two guys in a garage to start building the next unicorn, in a way you are pushing them out of your economy, and that's that's not net positive. That's net negative. So I think there should be kind of more gradual approach to it. So I think it's the typical sandbox or stuff like that. I think it makes sense in a way. The 2012 Manu will hate me, but you know, I think I'm getting older. But yeah, I'm still convinced that innovation should happen, and we need to also make regulation around that non-negotiable idea. That we need to allow poor people with no resources to have an actual impact on the economy.
Yeah. So when I met you, you are no. I think all of us are very different than 6 or 7 years ago, and like you are certain. So, and going back to your first point is that it's really difficult to comply with regulation, but it's the only way to onboard like 5 million people or 10 million people
Yeah.
or like whatever, or to convince my mom or my sister that they have to leave the bank and move to crypto. So. Thanks, Manu. It's been a wonderful conversation. I don't know if you have some final thought or like anything that you may want to say. This is your chance. If not, it was very amazing talking with you.
No, I think maybe as a founder and being part of the ecosystem for so long, you see a lot of ups and downs in the price that basically generates a lot of, let's say, demand or no demand for or interest in the ecosystem. I think crypto, stablecoins, and kind of the more broad fintech ecosystem, it's still really nascent in a way, and maybe this is more of a message for people that have been, tinkering around each one of the technologies that are hot right now. I think there's a lot of opportunities to build something meaningful in this sector. I would love to have more brilliant minds around crypto. I think once again, although it's been for some time now, we are just scratching the surface. Don't come for the wrong reasons, which is the price. Come here for the right reasons, which is kind of the revolution that we are trying to put into place. And thanks for the invite, Ben. This was great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And stay
Yeah.
tuned for the next episodes of Table Talks, guys. That's it. See ya. Bye bye.
See ya.
Thank you. See ya.